Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my Midlife Capers. I woke up with a wicked craving for biscuits this morning, and no matter how much I tried to think about alternatives and convince myself to go in that direction, my craving was not to be denied. So, I'm going to make for you a gluten-free, grain-free biscuit that is actually really pretty good. Over the years, it's been hard to go gluten-free and still be able to have those baked goods that actually are satisfying and that aren't really just kind of like a bitter disappointment and insult. But things have improved a lot over the years, and Bob's Red Mill Paleo Blend flour is one of the things that I have in my arsenal for that. So I'm going to use a recipe off of their website that actually is for the 1-to-1 gluten-free flour that they produce, but they do have in their comments section some suggestions for how to adapt the recipe for the paleo flour, and that's what I'm using. So to get started, I have in this bowl half a cup of the paleo flour mix with a teaspoon of baking powder and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now I always use Redmond real salt. It has a lot higher mineral count and is much better if you're going to have salt in your diet or added salt in your diet, because of the healthy properties that it has. Plus, you really don't have to use as much because it has a deeper flavor to it, so it doesn't take as much. One of the things I like about this recipe I found is that it's only for 2 biscuits. So I'm not going to have a whole lot of extra, and I didn't have to do the math to cut a recipe in half or in quarters or eighths or whatever to not have all this extra biscuit that I can't use and shouldn't be eating. And the other thing is that they recommend baking them in a cast iron skillet, and that means that I get to use my cute little mini cast iron skillets that I bought. Gosh, where did I find them? Oh, I found them at REI, and one of them has a little gingerbread person in the bottom of it, so that's gonna be fun. But anyway, back to the recipe. So I have the half a cup of Bob's Paleo and salt and baking powder, and then you add 1 whole egg and then the white of another egg into the mix. And the other ingredient that it calls for is a tablespoon of vinegar. Now it says white vinegar, and there was a question in the comments about whether you could use apple cider vinegar, and they said they hadn't tried it, but there didn't seem to be a reason you couldn't. I only have rice vinegar and balsamic vinegar somehow. I usually keep apple cider vinegar with me all the time, but for some reason I didn't get any. I think I was looking for a plastic bottle rather than a glass bottle of it and never followed through on it, and that's how I got out on the road without it. But I will be picking some up because I need it for other things. So I'm going to use rice vinegar because obviously balsamic vinegar would completely change the whole game and add too much flavor. And the reason for vinegar is that it does help with well, actually you're gonna have to look up what it does. I just know from years of growing up that a lot of the women who taught me how to bake put vinegar in a pie crust because it helped make it flakier. So that makes sense for this. So I'm putting after I take the top off, this is a new bottle, 1 tablespoon of vinegar in. Now the adaptation that they recommended if you're going to use the paleo flour instead of the 1-to-1 was to add more liquid, because this does include coconut flour, which absorbs liquid really quickly. And so I'm going to add half a cup of cashew milk. The brand that I use is Elmhurst cashew milk because it doesn't have extra gums or thickening agents or other things that a lot of milk substitutes end up having in them. If you look at your boxes of almond milk or hemp milk or other things, you've got you're going to see a lot of extra ingredients in there. This has cashews and water, so that's why I go with it, and it is a nice thick consistency. And so I especially use it in baking because it has the fats that a baked good needs to really feel substantial. Or if you have other recipes that call for heavy cream or whole milk, this is a really great substitute. I used to use coconut milk for those types of things, and I still do on occasion, but because it does definitely deliver that coconut flavor, I save it for maybe sweeter things or for Asian foods where that coconut flavor works well. So let me get this mixed up and combined. And they said that that the dough will hold together, but it's going to be a little stickier. So we'll see how that turns out. Because it definitely does look like there's liquidy. So I ended up having to add a little more flour and baking powder to this because I went a bit overboard on the cashew milk because I was guessing, and they didn't have any recommendations for ratios on the websites, but this will be fine. This is I've been baking long enough to have an idea of what I can do where. You don't want to experiment too much because baking is a science, and the measurements that are there for a reason. Because these little cast iron skillets are new, so they haven't really been seasoned other than what the manufacturer might have done. So I did have to put some oil in the bottom. I used a spray avocado oil. A coconut oil would be fine too, or whatever spray oil you might use if you're not concerned about the kind of oils you use in cooking. But then I put the dough into each of the skillets, and the last thing you're supposed to do on this is to brush egg yolk on top. So if you remember, we put a whole egg and then an egg white into the batter, and there was a yolk left over, so that's what that's for. And I have a pastry brush I brought with me somewhere, but I forgot to pull it out. And that's the thing, is one of the most important things when you are trying to cook in such a small space, and honestly really any cooking, you're so much better off if you plan ahead, make sure you have the ingredients on hand, and then measure everything out before you get started. It just makes the process go much more smoothly, and especially if you're limited in counter space or if you are working in tight quarters just in general, not having to shuffle around containers and things and measure out as you go just really helps a lot, and that is one of the most important things that I do. Now, I've got the toaster going, preheating a little bit. I don't do it too much because it's a tiny toaster and it doesn't need a lot of preheating to get to temp, but also it really heats up the camper, and don't need that, especially as I'm in summer. So anyway, I'm gonna get these in the oven, and I will check back with you when they're done. I really considered scrapping this whole video because I discovered something when these things came out of the oven that made me want to just get rid of it and not put this out there. But then I thought, this is a good life lesson, and I really should have trusted my gut. I was questioning the whole putting egg yolk on the top and then putting the egg white into the batter, because that just didn't seem right. Because typically you, if you're gonna put anything on the top of something to help brown it, it's gonna be an egg white, not an egg yolk. And I should have trusted myself on that, because I now have like a coating of egg on top of my biscuit. But you know what? They're not going to be sweet biscuits. They're savory, and it's not going to hurt anything. I do think that if I had done it the other way, where I put a whole egg and then an additional egg yolk into the dough and then brushed the egg white on top, they would have been even fluffier. Although, I mean, this is really not bad. I mean, they look good, and I did sneak a little taste of them, and they taste like biscuits. So I'm rolling with it. I have cooked up a little bit of bacon to go with them. I've avoided sugar cured bacon for years just because the sugar tends to make it burn easier, and I don't like that. And so that was already something that I had as a practice. But since I've been working on some of my health issues, I also just try to avoid cured meats. So there are a variety of brands out there, but I always look for one that's uncured with no sugar added. So that now you're going to have some nitrites, because anything, even cured in salt, you're going to have that, because that's just a component of salt. But I look for things that have only just 2 or 3 ingredients in them, and that's really kind of one of the best rules of thumb you can have for things like that. And then I have a cup of coffee I've just brewed. If you're interested, I alternate between a couple of brands, and I'll put links to all of these brands in the description. But I use one called Kion, Kion, that I get off of Amazon, that is low acidity, and it is sustainably sourced. It's a really great coffee. The other coffee I enjoy is Think from Four Sigmatic. Now, they also make an elixir for a tea. The Think one has lion's mane in it and some other things to help boost your mental clarity. And I've found that it actually really does work. Caffeine has no effect on me as far as waking me up, but just the hot beverage kind of perks me up. And when I use this or the tea, the lion's mane actually does have an impact on the way my brain functions for the first few hours of the day. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of Miyoko butter. It's vegan, and it's cashew based. And this stuff is amazing. It is the closest to churned butter of any non-dairy butter that I have ever found. And I absolutely love it. I put it on anything whenever I have an opportunity. And maybe that's not the most healthy thing to do, but it's just really good. So I'm going to include links in the description for all of these products, and I'm going to go eat breakfast. Have a great day.